All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out despite the snow. I want to introduce myself. My name is Rachel Dame. I'm a second-year MPP student and the president of PASA, which is the Public Affairs Student Association here at Humphrey. As my term is coming to a close over the next 2 years, I've been kind of reflecting about my experience at Humphrey. And one of the greatest takeaways that I've had as a student has been the experiential learning opportunities that have happened outside of the classroom. What initially attracted me to Humphrey was the rankings and the access to professors, but what has most enriched my experience here is the community that I've developed with students. Given the current political climate and polarization, I hope that Humphrey continues to build a space where this community can naturally occur. I wanted to continue to discuss a diverse range of views, both inside and outside of the classroom. As future policymakers, we need to ensure that we're giving policies that better our communities rather than bettering ourselves. An individual that has exemplified this quality for me is Dean Laura Bloomberg. Dean Bloomberg's candidness with students and ability to have discussions on topics that affect us is really important as we continue to build this community. One distinct memory that stands out to me about Dean Bloomberg is the discussion that we had when I first was elected as PASA president. I remember entering Dean Bloomberg's office and I was asking about what should my legacy be here at Humphrey as a leader. And Dean Bloomberg told me that she was still trying to figure out her own legacy at Humphrey. And I think that ability to think about your own legacy and how it's continually growing, it shows a sense of humility. And last night, President Kaler talked about humility at his house and how, and you mentioned how President Kaler embodies that, but I also think you embody that as a leader. And the ability to grow and be humble is something that is great for Humphrey and needed as the school continues to move forward. Dean Bloomberg, I want to thank you for everything that you do. It's been an honor to work with you this year as PASA president. And with that being said, I want to introduce the Dean of the Humphrey School of Public Affairs, Laura Bloomberg.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I've been here at this school for 12 years and I've seen that many PASA presidents, and I can tell you it's that Rachel is remarkable. You're going to be a tough act to follow with all of the enthusiasm and passion that you bring to the role. So thanks so much for all that you do. And welcome to all of you. Speaking of humility, there's something about watching the forecast, hearing the news, the greatest snowfall we've had in this ever so snowy February, and realizing that it's very possible I could be delivering a State of the School address to an empty auditorium. It does, in fact, keep one a bit humble. And I'm particularly glad to see all of you here today, that you braved the snow and you came out. Some of you had to come to work today anyway, so I don't flatter myself thinking that you did it just for me. But I would like to welcome here certainly the faculty, staff, and students who I will be talking about in a bit, our advisory council members, our honorary council members, and alumni council members who are here, and also those who are joining us live. We're live streaming this, so who will be watching remotely. Many of those people, as Rachel mentioned, were also together with us and the president and Mrs. Kaler last night at Eastcliff. And some of what you will hear today, I previewed last night. I would also like to welcome here Regent Peggy Lucas, and who has been such a remarkable friend of the school and a tremendous leader to the university. So thank you all for being here. You may know that the Humphrey School Constitution, well, first you may know that the Humphrey School has a constitution. And for those of you who know that, you may know that there's a part of the Constitution that says once a year, the dean will gather an assembly of the school's stakeholders, the students, faculty, staff, alumni, and community partners of the school, to do two things: to report on the state of the school and engage in a conversation about the state of the school and the direction we're headed. And so that's why we're here today. I intend to hold up my part of the bargain. I will tell you about the state of the school. And I hope you'll hold up your end of the bargain, which is to have questions. So I will talk for a bit, and then I would really like to open this up for questions. And we have with us a number of leaders from the school, including Associate Dean Slaughterbeck. So any questions that you have that I can't answer, we will have a number of people here who can. I'd like to start my comments by sharing with you an image of a work of art. This is what I spoke about last night. And it's a work of art that doesn't directly have anything to do with the Humphrey School, but it's a piece of work that has had a tremendous impact on me and continues to have a tremendous impact on me. And it's this sculpture. It's called the Portrait Monument. And it sits in the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. It is an enormous slab of white marble. And separate from what I'm going to say about it, if you're ever interested, you can Google the story of what it took to get this into place, because the floor where it is in the U.S. Capitol wasn't structurally sound enough to hold it. So there are adjustments that had to be made, but that's not why I'm showing it to you. This is a carving of the busts of three amazing leaders from U.S. history: Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony in the middle, and Lucretia Mott. And those three, some would say strong or stern and angry looking, I will just say strong and sturdy looking leaders, are significant to all of us right now as we prepare to celebrate or commemorate the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment and women's right to vote in this country. And although that's not why I'm sharing it with you today, let me just digress for a minute and remind you that it was in 1919, in the spring of 1919, when the 19th Amendment that gave women the right to vote in this country passed out of Congress. It wasn't until the following summer of 1920 that the sufficient number of states ratified the amendment and it became law. So over the course of the next year and some months, we as a nation, as a state, and certainly as a Humphrey School will be commemorating that remarkable time in our history. But that's not why I'm sharing this portrait monument with you today. I'm sharing it because it, as a metaphor, the metaphor that the artist intended, it moves me greatly. There's a couple of pieces about this. First of all, this whole bottom part, I can see my light from there. Can you see it from there? Is unpolished and rough-hewn marble. It's just there and it's raw. And you can see behind these three women is this piece that emerges that is also the same, unpolished and rough-hewn. And when you read about what the artist Adelaide Johnson had in mind, she talks about these remarkable leaders who dedicated their lives, who threw their all, they gave their everything to this vision of women's rights, and in particular women's suffrage, in a lofty, audacious way that they knew would take years and years and years to achieve. And in fact, very moving to me is that not a single one of those women who dedicated their lives to women's suffrage ever saw the passage of the 19th Amendment. Not one of those women ever voted, and yet they dedicated themselves to this important vision that they had for the future. And that is what really inspires me about this piece of work. It makes me think about all the ways that in higher education, and certainly at the Humphrey School, we engage in this audacious act of faith with the work we do, this audacious belief that the future is going to hold something bigger and better than we have today. And so I don't talk about this. I said this last night too, because I think we're all going to die before we see what we achieve. And some people last night said, but that could happen. And I'm like, yes, okay, I get that. But it's in general the metaphor that we invest in something we may not see. When you are a professor, and your work is to work with students who will graduate like Rachel and leave us, we will stay in touch with many of them, but not all of them. And they will take what they have learned here and do things in the world that we may or may not know about. And still we invest mightily in the education that we provide for students because we believe that our efforts of time and talent will result in something bigger and better than what we have today. It will yield a worthy future. And when our faculty and scholars in this building engage in research, I would submit that the catalyst of research is an act of curiosity, a question of what if, why, how come, if we did A, would B occur? Those are acts of curiosity. But when we share that work with the world, when we publish, when we write books, when we give talks, when we submit papers, when we submit testimony all over the world to all kinds of policy bodies, it's in fact an act of faith that this work will make a difference, that people will pick it up and move it further along in ways that we may never know. We accept that others may have to see it through. And that's what I want to think about today. It's what I want to talk about. There are for sure things happening in the world, and let me just share a couple of images that make me think about this. This is the front of the Atlantic from sometime this fall. I can't remember what month, but when I saw it, I thought, oh, wow, that just kind of sucks the oxygen out. So is democracy dying? Is the lead. But if you look up here, we have Trump builds his autocracy. Over in the other corner, we talk about how getting shot helped me understand policy, how artificial intelligence could give rise to tyranny, the slow motion crisis in America. There's no shortage of this. Or even more compelling and pithy was this. Many of you will remember that Paul Volcker came out with his book at the age of 91, something of a retrospective look at his career and a look forward. And many times I saw him on CNN, I saw him in the New York Times, I saw him on Fox News, and frequently he used this same expression, I see a hell of a mess in every direction. So those are the realities that we live in. I'm far more interested in focusing on the portrait monument and this investment in what we possibly can do to make a difference. And that's how I'll focus today. And I'd like to start those comments by talking about our faculty. As you walked in, I expect most of you picked up a copy of our most recent Humphrey Counts. We produce that document every year about this time, looking back at the year that was and kind of give you just a sense of Humphrey by the numbers. It doesn't tell the whole rich story, but it tells you a bit about where we are. And right now we have 46 full-time faculty. 33 of them are tenure track faculty members and 13 are full-time graduate faculty members. You'll see in that publication some impressive numbers that are a lot. Just trust us, they're a lot, but they don't tell you the richness of it. You'll see that our faculty published 155 refereed journals or manuscripts or published books this past year. Over 2/3 of our faculty are engaged in their own civic service on a local, national, or global level in addition to the work that they do here. And 85% of our faculty engage regularly with local or national news and policy outlets to share their expertise in a way that is applied and relevant in the world. Just before gathering here in the auditorium, we had an advisory council meeting and we had council members who were saying one of the things we really have to focus on is whether we are in fact doing work that is relevant in the world. I will share some examples of this in a moment, but some things that may seem esoteric to someone are deeply relevant in a policy arena in other places. And I think that's so important. I would submit that all of our faculty are doing work that is relevant in the world. There's not time to go through all of the accomplishments of all of those faculty members. As you walked in, hopefully you saw some of the slides that were scrolling that are just quick highlights of the accomplishments of our faculty over the past year. Those slides, I'm not exactly sure how we'll do it, but we'll make those slides available to you because it's a really great snapshot of some of the work that is happening here. But I would like to highlight a few, and I'd like to start with our newest faculty members. Daniel Cheng, is Daniel here? I can't see it. Daniel, could you just stand up? It's one of our newest faculty members. He's in our leadership and management area. Thanks, Daniel. And is doing, now I'm always a little humbled when I talk about other scholars' work in a way that will sound terribly simplistic to you, but in a broad sense, the work that Daniel is doing is focused on this notion of polycentric governance, something that we talk about a lot, that the work that needs to happen in the world to address our most serious and vexing problems is not going to happen solely in any one sector. It's going to happen when we figure out how to creatively and in an innovative way bring together the best thinking of the nonprofit and the public and the private sectors, and think about quasi-governmental organizations and intergovernmental initiatives. And that work requires us to understand what are the conditions and contexts that allow it to happen well, where does it happen well, and what are the things that hinder it, or where doesn't it work well. And Daniel's doing that important work in many different contexts, and we're really glad that he's joined us this year. Also, Bonnie Keeler. Is Bonnie here? I think I saw Bonnie earlier. If you could just stand up quickly. Our newest faculty member. That was really quick, Bonnie. That was like barely standing up. Bonnie is in our science, technology, and environmental policy area. Although she is not new to the University of Minnesota, she's been a scholar at the Institute on the Environment before we were so fortunate to extend an offer that she accepted to a tenure track position here. Bonnie is the director and lead scientist for a project called the Natural Capital Project, which focuses on understanding and trying to simplify how we can ascribe economic and real world value to things that are intangible, like things in the natural environment around the built environment. If you read the Star Tribune, you will have seen Bonnie all over it in the last couple of days, and particularly on Sunday, where she talks about some of the work of the Natural Capital Project, and surprising to many of us, challenged some assumptions about trees in the urban environment. I'm sure you're getting a lot of feedback about that, right? But we're also really, really glad that you're here and glad that you're doing the worldwide work that you're doing. So I won't summarize the work of all of our other faculty, but I want to share with you something that I've been thinking about a lot as we head into this next year at the school. We have a large and growing percentage of our faculty across the school, not only in the area that we call our global policy area, but across all areas of the school, who are engaged in research, who are teaching, and who are engaged in outreach on both a global and a local level, doing international work and doing work here closer to home. And it's intriguing to me to think about how we amplify, support, and perhaps extend that local global relationship. So let me just give you a few examples that are illustrative. They're not a comprehensive list, but illustrative of this. Dr. Jody Sanford, who can't be with us today because she's giving a talk at a conference in Arizona, I think she must have known what the forecast was going to be when she planned that, has really done groundbreaking work related to human service redesign and how we bring design thinking to bear on the human services that are a huge part of the budget of many states of all states in the United States. She is also actively and creatively figuring out how we share that information through the use of technology to other parts of the world, through the development of teaching cases and materials that are being used. The place that comes most to mind is in sub-Saharan Africa, where they too are thinking about human services redesign. Dr. Samuel Myers, who is our Roy Wilkins Professor of Human Relations and Social Justice, who is with us today. He emailed me yesterday and said, I think I can get there. I just don't know if I can get up the hill to my house on the way back home, but I'm glad you're here. Dr. Myers, as many of our students know, because he is truly a beloved instructor, teaches a lot of classes here looking at economics, and in particular, the economic inequalities that we experience as a state and as a community as it relates to race and culture and difference. Dr. Myers also thinks about this on a global level, and an example of that is that every 5 years, and 5 years seems like a lot of time in between. It, in fact, is not. I'm imagining planning is starting soon for the next 5 years. The Roy Wilkins Center, under Dr. Myers' leadership, hosts a world conference on remedies to economic inequalities based on race and ethnicity. So this last fall, that conference was held in Brazil. It was before the election of Bolsonaro. It was an interesting time to be in Brazil. I use the word interesting in that so Minnesotan way of talking about interesting. I was honored to have been there as a part of the conference. There was a tremendous delegation of faculty and scholars, also community leaders, members from the mayor's leaders from the mayor's office of Minneapolis and St. Paul, all were there as a part of it. And there were people from all over the world. in Brazil at a conference hosted by the Humphrey School focused on inequalities and what they look like in different parts of the world. It was a remarkable experience. Another example, Dr. Deborah Levison, who is, I believe, not here today. I think she's traveling, is also a celebrated and really beloved instructor at the school. She teaches statistics, which is something that is sometimes alarming for incoming students. And then they will often talk about just how manageable it seemed and how much they surprised themselves that they could learn about analytics from Dr. Levison. At the same time she's doing that work here, she is grappling with a really interesting research question in Tanzania in partnership with one of our doctoral students. And remember earlier I said that I think that the initiation of research is an act of curiosity. It's at its most human level, it's an act of curiosity. I wanted to share with you an email that Deborah sent to me about 2.5 years ago that speaks to this curiosity that has now led to a really powerful and full-blown study. She writes, Laura, for many years I have been reading broadly in the area of children's work and education in developing countries. Child development is closely linked to these activities, and yet economists don't often think about it. She has an economics background, by the way. But I have been drawn in that direction. I have found studies that try to ascertain children's own perspectives, especially revealing. I found those studies to be especially revealing and yet much neglected. There is a fine literature of qualitative research related to children's work, for example, but it gets absolutely no policy traction. Policymakers don't seem to pay attention. The policy conclusions and attention seem to derive to a very great extent from large representative data sets that ignore the input of children. They are rarely included in these surveys. And yet, she writes in all caps, and yet, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child says that adults should listen to children on matters that concern them. Ha, she writes, children are the largest silenced population in the world. So she's grappling with this. She's thinking about her analytic skills and this reality that we're making decisions for children based on a data set that doesn't include children. And she writes, so I've been thinking, I think it's possible with the electronics and technology that are available to us today to develop available to us today in survey research to validate and effectively include children in large-scale studies and surveys and to ascertain their perspective via the use of essentially tablets or iPads and animated vignettes. Anna, who is the doctoral student, Anna and I proposed to develop and test a methodology that will make children's perspectives more widely available to researchers and policymakers around the world. And that's exactly what they did. They set about working with artists, developing animated vignettes that would tell stories on iPads, and then create opportunities for children to say, what would you do in these kinds of situations? And now they're field testing it in villages and cities and towns across Tanzania and gathering a tremendous data set. And then we'll be working with the UN to say, we can, in fact, gather these data and we can get the information that we need and so want from children. 2 more examples. I realize I could go on and on because I'm really proud of the work of this community of scholars. Dr. Maury Kleiner, who is our AFL-CIO chair in labor policy, has for years been doing work studying the occupational licensing, the impact of occupational licensing on individuals in the U.S. economy. So now these are one of those areas that might seem a little obscure. Occupational licensing, what do we know about the economic realities of occupational licensing? And for a long time, I kind of thought that was rather obscure. And then I started reading about his work and thinking about the tremendous impact that it has on people where, one of the things he was looking at is hair braiders and the licensing of hair braiders, which disproportionately impacts women of color. And then you think about the costs of licensing something like that, and then the movement across state lines where different states recognize different licensing realities, and you realize this is a substantial economic question that impacts a lot of people. He does a lot of this work right here in this community. He also looks at this in an international way. And in fact, just last Friday, he testified before the European Commission with all 28 nations there, representatives from 28 nations in Brussels, talking about the effects of regulation on service quality. And he was particularly focused on ride sharing, Uber, Lyft, and the licensing of it and how it is impacting the economy and regulation and quality in places like Dublin and in London. I'd like to give a shout out to Kate Connors. Is Kate here? Where's Kate? Kate Connors right in the middle, who is our director of technology, IT, instructional and teaching technology learning. We changed the title. She's our tech wizard. For Maury to be here in this building testifying before the European Commission, first of all, we had to follow their timelines. So this happened at 6:30 a.m. last Friday. Maury had to be here. Dr. Kleiner had to be here, but so too did Kate Connors. And I'm really grateful to you for making that possible for him. Dr. Anu Ramaswamy is a global expert on sustainable urban infrastructure. She's often found in India. When she's not there, she may be in China, or she may be here in the classroom Skyping with people from India or China. She has often testified before the UN, and in particular the environmental program, the UNEP. Dr. Raghi Assad, as I mentioned earlier, has written a book about labor markets in Tunisia. He's also a leading expert on economic realities of young people in the MENA region, in the Middle East and North Africa. That has huge implications for all of us when we think about political stability or instability in the Middle East. And when he follows the growth of youth populations and the unemployment rate of young adults and where political unrest comes from, it's very significant, the work that he is doing. And then I'd also like to recognize Dr. Ryan Allen, who is very locally focused in much of his work as a planner and somebody who looks at housing and immigration. He also has done tremendous work focused on the economic realities of world immigration policy and laws on local economies. So what does it mean for us as a Twin Cities? What does it mean for us as a state of Minnesota when we think about the immigration policies that impact us? So I could go on, and I won't. But I want to tell you how I've been thinking about this and this question of our local work, our regional work, our statewide work, and our national policy priorities, even as we think about a broadening global focus. I wonder how it is that we signal the relevance of this and how we support it. Just recently, I was at an APSIA meeting, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We're not a school of international affairs. In fact, we don't have an international affairs degree here, nor, by the way, do I personally suggest that we should have one. That's not why I'm bringing this up. But in that context, a couple of things happened. First of all, I was asked to serve on the executive committee of that organization, which I will happily do. And partly it's because they are so blown away by our faculty who are able to bridge this boundary and be so locally relevant in our community and so globally focused, even as we don't have an international affairs degree. And they're also interested in the efforts that we're making, another thing that our advisory council just talked about, to think about diversifying the group of students who are seeking to understand on a greater level global public policy. It's one of the areas in public affairs schools nationally where we've seen the least level of gender and racial diversity. That this is an area in our policy schools that for a very long time have been largely the focus of European American men for whatever reason. And we are starting to see a change here. And although in many ways I wouldn't say we are the only leader in this area, we are a leader in this area. And I think, quite frankly, the time has come for us to stand proudly and declare that. So one of the things I'll be doing in the couple of weeks in partnership with our associate dean is to convene a working group, an ad hoc group of stakeholders of the school, faculty, staff, students, community partners, and alums to grapple with some of these questions. And although we'll get into the finer detailed questions with that group, I want to share with you some of the charge questions that we'll be asking that group to grapple with. First one, how might we amplify, highlight, or leverage this reality of our local and global work so that it is increasingly visible to important stakeholder groups like prospective students, faculty candidates, research partners, alums, and future employers of our students? Second question, how might we best communicate a school-wide global orientation to our stakeholders beyond the school, including professional peers, prospective students, and our donors and supporters? And then how can we both be most strategic in strengthening or expanding the visibility of our globally focused work in targeted professional arenas, like in APSIA, like in APAM, the professional organizations that really are based in the work of our peers. It puts us in a public affairs school context of our peers. So how can we do that strategically? And then how might we as a Humphrey School be a leader in this, what I shorthand call the global dialogue at the university, in this state, and in the United States, this local global dialogue? I want us to think about those things. I'm proud of this work. I'm proud of the fact that we can grow in our global focus without in any way sacrificing or cutting short the work that we're doing locally. So I would invite all of you to think about that with us. I would invite any of you who would be interested in serving on such an ad hoc working group to grapple with some of these questions to join us in that conversation. And so I expect that we will convene that group, like I said, in the coming weeks and look for an initial report and recommendations by, for sure, mid to late summer before we start next year. And although I don't presume to know what the recommendations would be, I will just foreground for you that when I was in Toronto at this APSIA group and asked to serve on the executive council, there were 4 of our peers who have been for a long time known as a school, the X School of Public Affairs, including the IE School of Public Affairs in Madrid, who did this most recently, and they changed their name to the School of Global and Public Affairs. Now, that's a controversial thing in some areas because some people will say, well, that presumes that public affairs isn't global, that you distinguish the two. Others would say we think that that's a dangerous thing to make that distinction. And the groups that have done it have said, we think it's important to signal that work. So we're going to be grappling with that. Is that a way that we would communicate and convey that growing focus of ours? So let me turn now to talk a bit about our staff. No, I'm going to save that. These are the colleagues who develop and organize our courses. They recruit, admit, counsel, and advise our students. They ensure, like I just referenced about the testimony last Friday, they ensure that our technology is working and is as state-of-the-art as it possibly can be in a public institution like ours. They ensure that the bills get paid, that our building is in good shape to welcome the tens of thousands of people who come through our doors every year, and that our employees are well supported. Our staff use their formidable administrative and leadership talents to ensure that our 8 research centers, our 7 degrees, and our 6 certificate programs operate smoothly and effectively. They are truly a remarkable team of professionals, and this place wouldn't run without them. At our holiday party this year, this was this next slide, we asked each other as colleagues to share our greatest hopes for the school in the coming year, in 2019. And I was really inspired and motivated by some of the things that we had a big sticky wall and people were writing notes and putting them on the wall. And for those of you who did that, and I said, I'm going to use this in my State of the School address, now you know I wasn't lying. I'm going to use this in the State of the School address. I was motivated by many of the comments. Sure, we all want better spaces in the building. We want parts of the building to be renovated. We want parts of the building to be warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer and all of those things. We want that. But that's not what people wrote about. They wrote about things that I believe are very, very mission focused. And I wanted to just share with you a few. One person wrote, I hope we continue to foster a community based on trust, respect, honesty, open and frank communication to achieve our shared goals and outcomes. Another wrote, I hope we keep hosting our community conversations. Let me just digress for a moment and explain this. About every 6 to 8 weeks, we tee up a topic that's controversial, it's timely, it's oftentimes a contested issue, and then we invite in over lunch or afternoon refreshments anybody who wants to come and talk about that topic. And this is students and faculty and staff and community partners all together. We do ask that people get, and so it is all just folks having a lunchtime conversation. That's the community conversations they're referencing. The most recent one we did was on free speech on college campuses and what does it mean to welcome and accept free speech and what is the difference between free speech and hate speech. It was a great conversation. Anyway, this person writes, I hope we keep hosting community conversations that bring together students, faculty, and staff to talk about important but difficult issues. Then I hope we find ways to extend these conversations into our communities beyond the Humphrey School. We know how to do this. I love that. We should be known as the incubator of choice for civil solutions to our greatest policy challenges. I would agree. I'd love to live into that kind of reputation. When new staff members come to work with us, Gail Peters and our HR team, about once a month when we have new staff coming in, because we oftentimes do a lot of hiring, because when we get new research projects, we hire research coordinators. So there's a lot of new people coming into the building. And I always meet with the group and I share this slide. It's not very fancy. I'm just going to talk you through it quickly. It's not very fancy by design. Because it's really what's behind it. It's not the fancy graphic that matters. But I want every person in this building, every staff member, every faculty member, every student to really understand why we're here. That your job might be to make sure the microphones are working, or somebody else's job might be to make sure that all of our classes are fully enrolled and students get the schedule that they want. But we're really all here to achieve the same mission. So right in the middle of this slide is our mission: to inspire, educate, and support innovative leaders to advance the common good in a diverse and changing world. I would love to have everybody in this building at all times know that that's our mission and let it, be able to roll off all of our tongues. Many of you have heard me talk about the visions we have for the work that we do. We are about this work. We are about this mission because what we want to achieve in the world as a deepened sense of democracy and civic life across all of the things we do in all areas of the school. We want to amplify the constructs that allow us to create hope, opportunity, and equity in that changing and diverse world. As a school, we want to broaden our global influence and our impact, and we want to broaden or expand the pathways of individuals into and through the school. That last one, we used to talk about pipelines, and I don't like that term really, because to me, a pipe implies you come in one end and you get shot out the other. And if you leak somewhere in between, that's a bad thing. So that's not a helpful metaphor to me. Pathways seems better. We have mid-career people coming in. We have people who aren't necessarily ready for a whole degree, but they'd really like to participate in one of our certificate programs or one of our many cohort-based training programs like the policy fellows. So we want to expand all of those pathways. So we are a part of a land-grant institution that has a three-pronged mission of teaching, research, and outreach. And you'll see, I hope you can see from where you are, that we use the term engagement on all three of these. One thing that I think is a mistake sometimes is that we think we're talking about engagement when we're talking about outreach, and we'll say our three-pronged mission as a land-grant institution is teaching, research, and engagement. That's not true. I would submit that everything we do should be engaged. We should be engaged with real people in the community with real needs and real ideas and real ways to contribute. So we should engage in engaged teaching, engaged research, and engaged outreach where we share our expertise with the world. And then the foundation of all of this, not the bottom of the pyramid, but really the foundation, the thing that holds it all up. The framework, if you will, is the administrative and operational areas of the school. We simply could not do the work of achieving the land grant focus of the university with our school-wide mission, with a vision of achieving this in the world if it wasn't for our remarkable staff. So you saw the slides of our faculty when you walked in. We have a number of staff members with us today, and I would just invite all of our staff to stand so we can recognize you and thank you for your work. Stand, stand, stand. And our students, you see a slide or a page in Humphrey Counts that talks about our current students, the impressive individuals who come to us every year and leave far too quickly. Our master's students typically are here with us only 2 years. Some who get dual degrees are here a bit longer, but really not even middle school anymore is 2 years. Usually that's 3 years. So this is a pretty short time in anybody's educational career, which means we have to pack a lot in. When Rachel was talking about her term as PASA president being almost up, it strikes me that that conversation in my office where she was talking about her legacy just seemed like yesterday. It's kind of amazing to me. Anyway, at any given time, we have about 420 students in the school. I can tell you, because we don't have it in Humphrey Counts, that number is down a bit from last year, not down to a level where we're alarmed. We tend to see some peaks and valleys. It's substantially up from where we were 3 years ago and 4 years ago. But last year, the year prior, so this is 2018 data, in 2017, that number would have been 412. We are tracking about the same area for our master's students for next year. I work with Sherlonda Clark, who is here, our remarkable admissions director, to look at our incoming students by degree program. And I asked her to give, last year I did this and this year I did it, to give me a list of students for whom, or of applicants for whom we have extended an offer that we would love for them to be here in the school. And like the top, it feels like 200, but it wasn't that many, a top chunk of students that we'd really love to be here, because I wanted to call them personally. And it's a lot of people to call. But I had the best conversations with students or prospective students, and the things they told me about why they wanted to be here were inspiring, and they would be inspiring to you. They want to be here because they know something about Hubert Humphrey. They want to be here because they know about our reputation, because they realize that there's amazing human rights work happening in this community. And then occasionally it's like a compliment on the slant. I didn't think anything was happening in the Midwest. Turns out I was wrong. It's like, that's right, you were wrong. So that was really fun, and I really hope that we will welcome many of those remarkable students this coming fall. Just as we asked our staff and faculty at our holiday party to talk about their greatest hopes for the school, we asked students, our communications team did last fall, to talk a bit about why. What is it that's working for them here? What do they love about the school? What matters to them? And I want to share with you some of the things that they said. They're written in kind of different ways. Some of them are written as advice to others. Some of them are as observations, but I love these. Come prepared for a transformation. Perhaps a little cliched, but it is apparent week by week, month by month, how Humphrey challenges each of us to grow in new knowledge, consider new ways of approaching the world's challenges, and connect with others in meaningful dialogue. You won't leave Humphrey as the same person you were when you came in, and that's a good thing. Someone else wrote, graduate school is a time to dive into what you want, but also discover more about who you are, and that is particularly true at the Humphrey School. It's impossible not to develop a stronger sense of vision while we're here. The academic atmosphere here forces and fosters contemplation on a vision for the type of world, the type of society that Humphrey Schools will go on to create and shape. And finally, we are a school filled with students invigorated by their work, sharing their experiences and devoting their time both in school and beyond to making our communities better. I'm constantly pushed by my classmates and professors to think in different ways and consider other options. That's pretty inspiring to me, and still, those of you who are here as advisory members will recall the conversation we just had this morning. We are always seeking to do a better job of that. always seeking to push a little harder, to challenge students a little bit more, to think a little bit more broadly about the work that we're doing. And as I said, we are going to be saying goodbye quite soon to many of our students as we prepare for commencement. And I am really proud to announce to you our commencement speaker for this year will be Laisha Ward. Laisha is the Executive Vice President and Chief External Engagement Officer at Target. Laisha is one of those individuals, like 26% of our graduating classes the last couple of years, who has taken a degree from public affairs, hers from the University of Chicago, but everybody's entitled to one bad decision, right? Just kidding. And using it in the private sector. Laisha, for those of you who know her, is a remarkable community leader and a remarkable citizen. I think of her as ours in the Twin Cities. And then I meet people in other parts of the country who think of her as theirs, because Target is all over, and she has made sure that she has developed relationships in places all over this country, and now I realize all over the world. Vernon Jordan, who is a civil rights leader that many of you know of and has been an advisor to many U.S. presidents, is a close friend and a mentor to Laisha. And when he found out that we had invited her to be our commencement speaker, he reached out to talk about how pleased he was to hear that. And I want to share with you something that he wrote in his email to me. He wrote, "Target's excellent reputation as a good corporate citizen and involved member of its communities across the nation is in very large part thanks to Laisha's vision and her hard work. In addition to her outstanding professional accomplishments, Laisha has earned my respect and admiration for the way she continues to seek counsel before making decisions." This speaks, he goes on at that point to talk about the African-American communities that they are both a part of, and how Laisha has never forgotten her roots in the Black community as she has thought about her leadership role in corporate America. In addition to her outstanding professional accomplishments, Laisha, hold on. Sorry, I lost my spot here. This speaks to her humility as well as her wisdom. She seems to have a natural understanding that the higher one climbs in the professional world, the more important it is to reach far and wide and back for additional perspectives. I'm really pleased that she will be here, and I'm eager to hear what she has to say at commencement. And while I'm on the topic of students, I want to talk just a bit about our fundraising campaign, because I have two relevant announcements related to that. As many of you know, we are in the midst of a $20 million fundraising campaign where we have targeted raising $2 million for the global expansion work that we want to do, $6 million to support the research and scholarship of our faculty, and the lion's share of that, $12 million, to support our students, so that the people, the best and the brightest, the most passionate students who want to change the world and want to come here to learn how to do it aren't denied access because they simply can't afford it. That's my goal, and that's the $12 million that we're seeking to raise. There are two people that we, in the process of this campaign, are thinking about and commemorating as we raise money to support students. On your left is Josie Robinson Johnson. Many of you will know we did a big kickoff last fall to do two things: to rename a very active public space in this building, Room 180, aptly and creatively named Room 180, to become the Josie Johnson Community Room. And we will break ground on that renovation in May, and it will be done over the summer, and to launch the Josie Robinson Johnson Scholarship or Fellowship in Race, Equity, and Social Justice. We will confer that first scholarship to an incoming student this spring for admission next fall. And I just couldn't be happier about the launch of that scholarship. On your right is a picture from many, many years ago of Jane Freeman, a remarkable leader who we lost this past year. She lived well into her 90s and was a very engaged citizen both in this community and in Washington, D.C. She was instrumental in founding the Girl Scouts. She was a very politically active partner to her husband, Orville Freeman. Our Freeman Commons upstairs is named after the family. That space will also be renovated this summer. But what we are going to do to honor the memory of Jane Freeman is to launch a fund to support internships for students who are seeking to do work in rural America, focusing on rural policy issues. It's an area where we think we can grow as a school, where we can do a better job of supporting our students to be engaged in the issues that are really relevant outside of urban areas. Things like broadband access and connectivity, water quality, what affordable housing looks like outside of rural areas. And yet it's not cheap for a student who is studying in an urban area to leave for the summer. They may need to keep their lease on their apartment. There's a lot of expenses. They have to find a place to live if they go someplace into rural Minnesota, probably. And so we wanted to create a fund in Jane's memory, and we will launch that and also give the first internship scholarship this spring. So I'm very pleased about that. And before I finally turn to the state of our finances, I will urge you to take a look at the PhD data in the Humphrey Counts. We have 31 students. We will be we just extended offers to an incoming class of doctoral students. It will be our 6th class this fall. That program is going very, very well. And Carissa and I have been talking about this along with the director of our PhD program who couldn't be here today. And we think that in the 6th year of the life of the PhD program, it would be a good time to launch an external review of that program, not because there are problems, but because there are not. We're at a point where we can think creatively about the program. We can invite in our peers from around the country and around the world to review that program and give us feedback. So sometime in the coming year, probably about a year from now, we will launch an external review of our doctoral program. I'm really quite excited about that as well. There's a lot I would like to say about the community engagement work that we do, and I'm also aware of time, and I want to make sure that we have time for your questions. So let me just highlight a few things. Last year, our commencement speaker was Anne Marie Slaughter. She was terrific, and we have continued to be engaged with the New America Foundation that she directs. And actually, Anne Marie and I will both be in Cairo shortly to both give talks at American University in Cairo and also talk about how the Humphrey School, New America, and parts of the MENA region may partner together on questions of connectivity and polycentric governance, to use a term that Daniel uses. We have invited in leaders from around the world this past year, and as I said earlier, tens of thousands of people come through our doors every year to engage in conversations with our esteemed faculty and research staff, and also people that we invite in because we use our reputation to have them here. Last year, Thomas Friedman gave a terrific, brief but terrific talk at our Public Leadership Awards, and I wrote this down because I think it's so important. He made passionate and really thoughtful comments about true U.S. patriotism being an act of inclusion and openness. That was the focus of his talk, and it had quite an impact on many of us. Many of you were with us just recently when John Meacham delivered the Distinguished Carlson Lecture this past year and talked about the virtues of humility, curiosity, and empathy. And then just a short time after he was here giving that talk, he eulogized former President Bush at his funeral and spoke passionately about his work studying presidents over the years. We will soon, we're not quite ready to do this, but we will soon be announcing our 2019 Distinguished Carlson Lecture, which we expect will be happening probably next November. And then in April, we will have our 2019 Public Leadership Awards, and we are so honored to be giving leadership awards to Dr. Janetta Betch-Cole, former director of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African Art, and the first, this just kills me, she's the first female president of Spelman College, a women's college. But regardless, she is a remarkable woman and is very excited to be here, as are many members of the community who know of her work. Gary Eichten, whose voice is known to so many people for his years on public radio, and now the remarkable work he's doing trying to build bridges and host conversations in the community. We will honor him for his lifetime of service to this community. And then Brigadier General Sandy Best, who is an alum of our Humphrey Fellows program and is also one of the highest ranking women in the military, the highest ranking female in the military in Minnesota. We're very excited about these awardees, and I hope all of you will be there in April. And then finally, before closing, let me just say something briefly about the state of our finances. I referenced our campaign. We have cleared 70% of our goal. We're coming up on 75%, or 3/4 of our way to our $20 million goal. We have exceeded our goal for fiscal year 2019, but that's no reason to stop working at it. I'll just stay here. I'll get to that one in a minute. But that's just a part of the pie. As you know, in the last couple of days, we heard the governor's budget and the plan in his budget for funding for the University of Minnesota, less than what this university had asked for. We'll see how that all pans out. That will have implications for how we set our budget for this coming year in the coming months. And Mark Erickson, our finance director, and our whole team will be talking quite a bit about that. This $29.4 million budget is up slightly from the year prior, mostly related to increasing expenses in our outreach and research areas. I would say that we are cautious and frugal, but we also believe that investment in our work and our mission is a wise financial decision. So we are constantly seeking ways to make education more financially accessible to our students, meet the research and support needs of our faculty, and also keep this building as open as possible for our community partners. So we spend about $12.7 million on research, $2.5 million on outreach and engagement, and $13.4 million on curriculum and instruction, the largest area, as you would imagine. So I am happy to answer more detailed questions about our budget if you should have them, but that's it in a nutshell. And in closing, I'd like to give the last word to somebody who's not here, but will join you on screen in a minute, the mayor of St. Paul, Melvin Carter. Last year about this time, the Wilkins Center, again under the leadership of Dr. Sam Myers, hosted an event here, a day-long seminar to commemorate the remarkable work of former Minneapolis Mayor Sharon Sayles Belton, who was going to be here today. I don't think Sharon made it. I have an email from her. I didn't see it. Sharon, as many of you know, was the first female and the first African-American mayor of Minneapolis. She was elected in 1994. In the last couple of years, a bust was erected in her honor at City Hall in Minneapolis. And then last year, we commemorated her here. Little could she have known in this image of the portrait monument, going back full circle to this thing I've been thinking about, little could Sharon Sayles Belton have known in 1994 the impact she would have on other people, or that over 20 years later, a young graduate of the Humphrey School would be inspired by her leadership and have the audacious faith in his own future to run for mayor of St. Paul as the first Black mayor of that city. And he obviously, as we all know, was elected. So he was invited to speak last year at this commemoration. And I want to share with you a clip of what he said, because I think it speaks so powerfully to that same image that I have of the portrait monument. But before I play this, I have to tell you this is true. Sam Myers emailed me yesterday to talk about the weather and how I don't know if there'll be many people at the state of the school. But that recall, last year there were 18 inches of snow on or around February 23rd when we commemorated Sharon Sayles Belton, and people showed up for that. And I thought, well, no pressure there, you know. But also, it was at exactly the time that I was double checking this video that he emailed me, which seemed kind of serendipitous. So here's what Melvin has to say. It starts a little quiet, but it'll get louder. If we can make it go. Okay, here we go.
My request for all of you is to just stand forward in this moment. Stand forward in this time and be accountable for this moment, to step forward. Mayor Belton made history. People told me when I got sworn in that I made history. We have an opportunity to make the future. And I would submit that that's the far more important thing that we can do. I stand here as part of the future that Mayor Belton helped to create. And the only question I think for us right now, we're going to celebrate the past and we're going to acknowledge and honor your legacy, Mayor Belton. And as that track person, I've learned that when somebody brings me a baton, we call it the stick. When somebody brings you the stick, the way you honor them is not by stopping and turning around and telling them how great they just ran. It's by taking that stick and charging forward into the future. And the question for us now, the way we honor Mayor Belton isn't just with a bronze bust in City Hall. It isn't just with a luncheon. The way we honor Mayor Belton is by paying her legacy forward, not just focus on the history, the history that's already been created, but focused on the future that we must create together.
I can't top that.